Hi, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to this special week of Lima Online, a series of events that we organize in collaboration with Japsam Books, and that takes place on the occasion of the release of the book, A Critical History of Media Art in the Netherlands, Platforms, Policies, Technologies. And because of this occasion, I've invited four important institutes of media art in the Netherlands to talk about their history, about their present, and probably also about their future. I talked already to Stijn and to Lima, and I'm very happy that we can talk about V2 tonight. And I have Ari and Florian of V2 here with me tonight. So welcome, Ari, and welcome, Florian. Thank you for joining me on the screen.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's good that you're here with an impressive amount of books. So I think I want to invite everyone to ask questions in the chat because Ari is prepared, and if he doesn't know it, he has his books to research, to do live research. So yeah, please keep the questions coming. He's ready. So yeah,
Yes.
I think we're gonna just start at the start, perhaps. V2 is already going strong since the 80s, so
Yes.
I think maybe it's interesting to see where it comes from and how it has evolved. But we have 1.5 hours to do so, so I would say go.
Shall I just kick it off?
Yes, please.
So happy to be here. First time I think I do a live online presentation. Normally I'm used to walking up and down and waving my hands and moving my body while speaking. Now I shall try to keep still and just talk. So Sanneke invited me to talk about the history of V2 tonight. And I thought, I'm really happy to do that. It's a subject I talk about, with a lot of joy. Let's say it's always a joy to dive into the archive of V2 and just browse the website, look at old videos, look at old photos. Basically, that was my preparation for tonight as well. Which of course is also to celebrate the publication last year of this book, which is by Japsam Books, which has a chapter on the history of V2, which started in 1981 already in 's-Hertogenbosch. But I didn't want to just tell this story again, like how V2 started in 81 and how it evolved into an institute for unstable media in the 1990s, the move to Rotterdam, the big Dutch electronic art festivals which followed, and how it has evolved into what it is now, a lab for the unstable media, and how it positions itself in this whole field of art and technology. Which I think is very different now than from what it was in 1981. I was actually more thinking of kind of try a sort of reflection on the history of V2. Because if you want to read the story of these 35 years, there is a short overview in the book, and there are shorter overviews even on our website. And that's why I invited Florian Weigel, who's also a lot younger than me, and who's also now working at V2 as a curator, to kind of try to get a sort of layered approach to the history of V2. So what I'll try to do is dive into really the early history of V2, like really the first 10 years. I'll stop at like 1992, I think it is. And Florian will react to that also with examples which are much more current. And what I'm kind of interested also diving into this early history of V2 in the differences between then and now, but also somehow how certain things are present in that history, which are still relevant now, though maybe our approach now to those same themes or those interests is different. Maybe I'll just, yeah, I wrote down a couple of points, so I'll start my little presentation. Let's see that it goes fine. Yes, it's here. Share. And great, this is the one that we didn't have. Okay. So the V2 was our nice. So one thing is, which is maybe the same, which was very much present in the early history of V2, is the urge to find other places, other occasions, and other ways of bringing art to the public. I'll give a good example of that. It's also things like a combination of different art forms and technology. It's an interest in participation of the public and an interest in interaction. It's a focus on research and trying out. It's tests with the public. It's just like working with technology, with your hands, like trying out stuff. But coupled to an interest in how technology changes art and society. It's using computers and networking technology to make art. And also kind of this sound and vision stuff, which in my view, maybe never felt central maybe for V2, yet if you like browse through the archive, it kind of pops up again and again and again. Even if you go to the early manifestations of the unstable media, you see many performances that use both sound and vision in the performance. And well, that continues now, I think, as well. And then there is the interest in the role of the media and sort of media critique, which maybe comes out of video art partly, comes out of, later becomes technical media. And it's a bit of a question if, in how far and in what ways that recurs now. So I hope these are sort of the points that I had in mind after having browsed again and again through in the past week through the archive. And I don't want you to read all this, but this was somehow what stuck in my mind and kept being stuck in my mind, thinking about sort of the difference of V2 in the 1980s to the V2 in the 1990s, in the 2000s, and to what V2 is now. That in the way that you see all these recurring themes, I mean, V2 was interested in VR in the early 1990s, and that returns later on with augmented reality, and it's a big field now again, maybe less for V2 than for a commercial world or commercialized world. But it's this idea of structures of feeling, and structures of feeling is a term by the British sociologist of literature, Raymond Williams, also a Marxist. And it is his way of trying to grasp in a concept, let's say, yeah, the structure of feeling of a time. So it's not zeitgeist. It's not what Foucault will call episteme. It's not Gramsci's hegemony. It's not everything that's dominant and that decides on what you can do and what you cannot do, or how your artworks will be interpreted. It's not that kind of framework. It's kind of the lived experience. It's the feeling that it's beginning to be articulated in the works, or also in cultural behavior. So it's somehow in between a structure or not yet a structure and lived experience. And somehow this structure of feeling of V2 in the 1980s is so different, I think, from what it is, from the structure of feeling of our generation now. So to kind of get us also a later approach to the history of V2, I kind of imagine that Florian might have a kind of maybe different take on that structure of feeling from his own background than I have. Sort of, I keep, and this is sort of maybe a more personal thing, I keep going back to this early history of V2, and I think I'm not the only one. You saw it a bit also in this presentation that Martijn van Boven had about the communications hiccups, where there was kind of quite a few of his students also chose work from the 1980s, and also work that I would never have thought that students of now would choose as a kind of inspiration in these times. So this is something that somehow makes me wonder what this lure is of these 1980 things. I was young then. I mean, I sort of knew V2 only from a distance, so it's also partly the part of the history of V2 where I was definitely not there yet, though I knew sort of had an idea of what V2 was doing because it was simply part of it. It was on the radio, it was in magazines about music. I mean, they did put on concert of Laibach and Sonic Youth and Test Department, so it sort of was there in the culture, but it was definitely not my my background. I became involved with the world of new media like in the middle 90s, like 1994, Doors of Perceptions, and then afterwards I started working at Mediamatic. So just to sketch my sort of connection to this. So this is sort of this lure of the 1980s and the structure of feeling of that time that V2 definitely came from, I think, which somehow keeps fascinating me. So I just decided also for tonight for that reason to take a couple of examples from that early time as a starting point. And this is the earliest starting point. It's sorry, I forgot to stop the share, and you're looking at the structures of feeling instead of my face. I'll go back to my face in a moment. So this is one of the earliest events of V2 when it was still a squad in Den Bosch. Probably this was 1981 or 1982, where the people that were involved with Mediamatic at that time, I mean, a lot of painters, but also people like Alex Adianse and Joke Brouwer, of course, used the big boards that were in the city of Den Bosch for the elections as a place to show their own art. Because this is sort of where V2 comes from. It's a group of artists that feel they don't fit within the gallery system, they don't fit within the art system, because they're doing different things. They're doing painting, they play in bands, they do poetry performances, they do strange performances, they do stuff with video monitors on stage. They begin to have an interest in sound art. They are trying out different things with motors, with sorry, I was trying to stop the share and have me seeing it. And kind of, this is just what they were doing. This is their practice. And in order to find a place to show this to their audience, they start, well, it's the early 80s, so they squat a building and they put on events. And basically V2 evolves then from that as an artist initiatives and from the practice of people. This is of people who are making stuff and making stuff with different means. And this interest in technology is already there from the start. It's Alex Adriaanse who has an interest in electronics. It's Joke Brouw. And also in getting the audience participating in art. So it's then very quickly kind of the discovery of interaction in art, which stays sort of really one of the core themes of V2 through the ages. But in the kind of in the this was not a handy way. So it's also in the 80s, this is still this is very much connected to the cassette culture. I'm not sure if the person on this photo is Menno Grootveld, but it could be Menno Grootveld. This is from a booklet that came out with one of the cassettes. This is a photo of Godeschenering of Horst Rickels and Elvira Wersche. That's 1985. This one was 1984. So V2 is also very much part of this European scene of small publishers, small initiatives that give out, that release cassettes next to doing their art, and they also start to make booklets with those cassettes. So you have this, for instance, Take the Media Week, which is also from 1985. It's with Test Department, but also kind of this urge to take over mass media, or rather to make your own medium. So I think it's interesting to see, this is cassette culture, this is self-publishing, this is before BBSs even. So very quickly, this sort of scene becomes a scene that moves online, that moves first to BBSs and then moves on to the World Wide Web, but then it's already 1994. So it's already there it's there in a different way. And it's also part of finding different channels to bring art to the public. So, and then this is a photo of Beweging Tijd Ruimte, which is this large installation which Joke Brouwer and Alex Adriaanse make together with also often music by Jean-Marc Vivenza. It was shown at a couple of places also around Europe, in I think Barcelona, but it was first shown at V2. I'm not sure. Maybe this is a good moment to kind of have Florian react to what I am saying. I'm not sure if you want to react or.
Well, hey, first of all, Sanneke, thank you for inviting me. Congratulations on the book, also for Marga, of course. I wanted to already interrupt with the structures of feeling, because that's, of course, a really nice moment. We talking about the possibility of doing this conversation together. That was the thing that struck us both, I think. And you mentioned, well, the site guides itself, and at that time, I already made the bridge between some of the artists that we're currently working with. I mentioned Meinix de Nijs and Driesens and Verstappen, for example. But you specifically said that there's a difference between these or the practice of the early days I wrote down because they really had this. They found freedom within the use of technology, and I think that could be an interesting point to elaborate on before.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a very important point. I think that's for the generation in the 1980s, and then especially for the generation that discovers the internet as a place to do art. Technology really had the promise of a new world and of making a new world. And maybe in the 1980s and especially in the middle 80s, this was still sort of from a no future perspective. And sort of from this take the media, take over the media kind of urge, but still it was already technology as a way to created a feeling of freedom. That's also how Alex Adriaanse formulated it in an interview I did with him a couple of years ago. So it was also in working with all those new technologies, but that might be just video, and later it becomes the Amiga computer, it becomes the Atari computer, it becomes using a BBS, it becomes getting in, doing something on the internet. It is a promise that you can change the arts, and through technology also change up to a certain extent society. And around 1993, 94, this really in the world of people that start to use the internet, this really carries a utopian feeling of really creating a new world. And this is not just using or working with the technology and making a new piece of art, and kind of the using these materials and these new technologies make it possible for you to create something new, which is different from what happens in the arts. It's really kind of a feeling of a new world opening up. Like there is, it's almost maybe not a blank space, but there's possibilities there. There's a new world that has not been occupied yet. I mean, that's the strongest, of course, as a metaphor for the internet in 93, 94, but definitely also for the people who will see it later, maybe that start to work with network technologies. It's not occupied, whereas now I think for a lot of people that work with newer technologies, or just with the technologies that we all have here, it still creates for them a freedom to make new things, but the technology itself comes not with the feeling that there is a free world there. It's rather a place that is already occupied, and that's occupied by rather dark forces than by forces that are very nice. So I think that's well, maybe a bit black and white spoken, but I think that there is a definite difference between the 1980s and also the middle 90s and now. And it's not maybe that the approach to technology is different, but it's the feeling also towards the technology which is different. But yeah, maybe you have more to say or something else to say about that.
It's I think that was in the conversation the moment that we agreed upon, I think, because I still see this. I started from the notion that still lots of artists we work with want to control every aspect, or want to know, and that was my that was I found that like a somewhat similar approach than the artists that really started to do. But it's a good distinction that you make there for sure. So yeah, and because that was the fun thing, of course. We both do a lot of these talks about the history of V2, and mine is I've been working here for 5 years, and I've been actively visiting it for 13 years, I think. So it's a lot less than you have. So I already started making bridges, like you, the manifest for the manifestation
we'll get
for the
to
unstable
that.
media might be a good one to introduce now, and somewhat bridges that I made.
Yeah, shall we make a little break and look at the short video of Beweging Tijd Ruimte, Beweging Tijd Ruimte, this work of Joke Brouwer and Alex Adriaanse, which is from '86, which just predates the Manifesto of the Unstable Media. And so this is large-scale interactive installation where also through the use of photocells and infrared, there is some sort of an interactive behavior between the public and what happens in the installation, but it's mainly about time and technology. So just to get a little bit of difference in our presentation, let's look at the video now. So this is the cue for the video.
Yes, welcome back. And thank you, Ari and Florian, for this first interesting reflections on the Institute. I want to take this opportunity to have a look at the chat. Besides that, Kaiser Willem is there talking to Josephine. I do also see some questions already. And it's funny because it's two things I have been thinking about. What you talked about does remind quite some people of video, and Josephine mentions talking back to the media. I don't know if she means that in a larger sense or the manifestation from 85, which seemed to coincide with also the media week of V2. But also I was thinking, like, in talking back to the media, there was indeed a lot of playfulness. It was just this first moment where there was this feeling of, oh, we can actually talk back and we have a voice, we as artists. And David Garcia was one of the initiators. But when he continues on and he organizes Next 5 Minutes almost at the same time, and the second edition of Next 5 Minutes is already when the internet is there. And then it's also when it becomes more sinister in a way. So it's also, of course, the internet was also this open field of endless possibilities, but also this direct realization of, like, oh, things are getting real or so. And it's funny.
Yeah, no, that's
And the other question is by Marga, and she also thought of video art when you say not occupied, and that is indeed was the reason for many female artists to pick up this camera and be the first to experiment with a medium that was not male dominated. So she asked if you see also similarities or differences in this and what you talked of.
I think I mean, there's definitely a similarity in how people took to video as a medium for art, and how artists, or some artists in the 1980s, and take to using diverse media and using monitors and using videos plus music plus other stuff to make art as a field that is not occupied. I think you would have to dive in really deeper if it really is a difference in political as in a political way of looking at that, or political artistic way. I'm not sure. Definitely in the history of V2, there has been a female and also a feminist approach in there, but it's not really what is very apparent, especially not in early history. Although of course Joke Brouwer's work is there, so the feeling of the not occupied, that is really, I think, important when V2 takes to network technology and to the internet as well. That's really the feeling of an unoccupied space, and that especially, I think, is really different now. I think there's not many people now that would take to VR with a feeling now of this is unoccupied space and we're going to do something here, not even in taking to video games or such environments. But maybe also, Florian.
You mentioned this the unoccupied feeling, but in the article in the book, you talk about technology or the technology bringing the possibility of bringing communication into the equation, or I probably misquote you, the possibility that technology brought bringing communication into the work. That's
very important for V2 and for Alex's work, for Alex Allianz's work, for Joke Brouwer's work, for many others that start doing interactive installations. It's this realization: if we have a little motor and a little sensor, and you can have something trigger that, and if you couple that to a computer which can maybe when you write an algorithm or you program a little chip, and then you bring in a communication and an interaction in the work itself, and the work itself becomes also in that sense then unstable, because there's not anymore this object. I mean, this is, let's say, looking from the perspective of painting or sculpture, where the work of art is something which is totally stable and always the same, which is not true, but that's a different thing. But here, like, yeah, what is the work then? It changes all the time. It's unstable. There's communication in the work itself, and that really becomes something that they begin to explore. And maybe this is then a moment also to make the bridge a bit to the moment when V2 makes really name internationally. Though already I came across a newspaper clipping in our archive, just online, where Alex Adriaans is quoted as saying, like, well, yeah, there's not that many people coming to V2, but especially there's no people from Den Bosch coming. But I don't really care, because there's people coming from France and from Germany and from Belgium. So yeah, so it was already international before that. But they really make a name when they bring out the manifesto for the unstable media. It's not so well known that there have been different versions of that. And the first version was the end of '86. I think that was a version that was published also as an ad in the Dutch newspaper, the Volkskrant. Though don't I would have to check to be really sure. The bigger one, the more and the better one, the one that's better, that has become better or well known, is from a bit later, 1987. Actually, kind of distributed also in the thousands, just door by door in Amsterdam and Rotterdam and a couple of other places. And this is where V2 coins the term unstable media. And there are, in a way, different things that inform this manifesto. On the one hand, it is this idea of artistic production outside of the arts and outside of a system of the arts that they feel is outdated. It's of something of the past. It's static. It's not interesting anymore. We're doing something else, and we need a place for that. And here we are. And this is art which is unstable. It's art that deals with electronics. It deals with the world now, a world which is being changed and transformed by technology. So that's one part of it. And then there is another important aspect to it, or theme coming in there, and that comes much more from, that's really something that comes from Joke Brouwer, I think. And that is the idea of instability that comes from physics as well, and from quantum physics. And that's kind of interesting also, in that through the whole history of V2, there has been a lot of themes around, let's say, around biological metaphors or ideas that come from biology. And one of the most important ones is, of course, the idea of autopoiesis from Maturana and Varela, which is actually from the middle 80s, I think, and kind of started inspiring a lot of artists, but also a lot of science already in that time. And also in the mix comes there the idea of chaos, from chaos theory, but also the idea of working in networks, and sort of the network as the dominant metaphor of looking at the world and how the world is structured. Like, the world is consisting of something which is consisting out of unstable networks, which are being grown and and that emerge, and actually that this is kind of, let's say, the much stronger in a sense than the idea of static structures. So this is an idea that you see that will come to dominate a lot of the Dutch electronic art festivals from the background. Of course, there's also the influence there of Arjen Mulder, who worked on some of the Dutch electronic art festivals and whose books have been very informed by by theory from biology. I mean, partly these are kind of themes that I find very interesting. That's why I keep coming back to it as well. But it's this idea of unstable media as the core issue of V2, and ever since '87, sort of that stays something that defines what V2 is, and that even I think we sometimes go back to kind of be inspired again by, or kind of be reminded about what we are doing. So I don't know, maybe it's also to Florian to sort of reflect on that. And
yeah, I was thinking maybe, do you have the manifest, the English
yeah,
manifest?
I have it here. Yeah,
because that's the.
I'll share the screen. Yeah.
It's the earliest one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This, yeah, it's in Dutch.
Yeah.
Because it was written in Dutch.
Yeah.
Wij houden van de instabiliteit en de chaos omdat ze de vooruitgang zijn. We love instability and chaos because they are progress. And
yeah, it's funny because it is. We've been giving talks about the history of V2 for such a long time, and this is always the one I start within the presentation. Either the squad at V2 that we a couple of years ago visited with the whole team, or this one. And I throughout I looked at all the talks I gave, and throughout I keep picking different quotes, and especially now diving into it with you and seeing especially Alex's voice now and Joke's. It's really interesting how if you every time you read it you find new things in it.
And Florian, I'm just wondering that as a curator, what does it mean to you now, this manifestation, and do you take out things that you work with when you work with like contemporary artists, or the way you select them? Because it was all very punky,
Sure,
and of course we can't be so punk anymore, or you don't want to be so punk. You have been called even an institute.
Maybe we should be again.
But that's maybe already letting go the institute, like calling yourself an institute is part of going. Maybe we should go back to. You should go back to more punk. But is this something indeed that you? That is material you still like can actualize and work with in your selection of working with artists and so.
The funny thing is, within the team, we I think for the new 4-year plan, we had a brainstorm, or a couple of day brainstorm, and we all came back to the manifest and are thinking of new ways to embrace it, ways to reflect on it, also ask artists or the people that theorists to look at the manifest again. And so I think within the whole team it's still words to live by, but I can imagine why because we interpreted it in such a different way than how it was meant. Well, yeah.
No, but that's interesting. I think the interesting thing about this manifesto is there's many things in there, and though it comes out of really this kind of punky attitude, it is not. It's not the ideas that are in there are not completely tied to that. So you can reinterpret it again and again and again. That's why it maybe you can call it a classic. I mean, that's and that's not true for many works throughout the history of art and throughout the history of V2 and a lot of works you look at and you think like, what the hell? Yeah, what the hell? I mean, I didn't reflect now on Beweging Tijd Ruimte and this video, which just gives some insight into what kind of installation it was, but also partly not. This manifesto is really, in that sense, also different in that it is open to new interpretations again and again and again. Also because it's ideas, because it's kind of basic ideas about instability. Maybe also because it's in parts also maybe not vague, but maybe too open. It doesn't pin itself completely down, so it's ambiguous in certain senses. There's sometimes also sentences in there that I think I completely disagree with, and that maybe 2 years later you completely agree with again. So that's more the sort of quality or maybe ambiguity of the text itself, more even than of the context in which it was presented, and the manifestation for the unstable media and the works that were shown there, for instance.
Do you have indeed, to make it more concrete, maybe indeed actual projects or things that you feel like they have this kind of spirit of actualization of what we did at the time, or maybe even how you go against it, or I don't know.
Yeah, for me personally, it's the one word that would stick is really artistic experimentation, and I think that's been in the DNA at V2 since the beginning. So also in the projects that I'm involved with. I'm thinking out loud what makes sense to introduce now. Do you want to add something to the film you saw, Ari, maybe? Or
now we could also go to this little the documentation of the dynamic dialogue, work by Joke Brouwer with help by Alex Alianse. And that is a sort of documentation video of I think 4 minutes, and it explains how the work has been made, how it functions. Now I've never seen the work in real, but it shows the kind of aesthetic of that time. It shows the working with interaction, with words, with static, with noise, with sound and light. So I think it's a nice example of how in that time different technologies were connected together to make an interactive installation. And I would say that sort of urge to connect technologies together in order to make a work. That is still very relevant. There is also sort of the also in that work a sort of critique to the media, and I was first thinking like that's not so present at V2 anymore, but there was the Jonas Lund performance piece, where he had the 30 people, 40 people at V2 writing troll comments on Twitter and creating all these fake profiles, which is also a way of talking back to the media, in a sense. So shall we look at the dynamic dialogue video and then reflect on now? So that would be the cue for Jose to.
Yes, and welcome back. And I think Florian used this couple of minutes well to search for some material of the Jonas Lund exhibition. It would be lovely if you can share it. Oh, you're already
Oh,
there.
sorry, I'm already. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
no,
I just
that's cool. Yeah.
I just have some photo documentation. So for those who haven't ever been to V2, this is our space, and we for the performance of Jonas Lund called Operation Earnest Voice, we transformed the space into a cubicle, a working space where we had 25, 30 volunteers, paid volunteers, to troll together with Jonas Lund, who's in this picture. So.
And how did it work? Because I think they were even like, it was really like paid labor, wasn't it? They
Yeah,
were
it was
like
paid labor. It was the really long durance performance of 3.5 hours, I think, where everybody was able to also propose one topic that they wanted to troll with, from people that made extremist memes to topics that they really cared about, and everybody was working for that half an hour, or no, it was a lot less than half an hour, for 10-15 minutes on this specific topic to shake up the internet. They all had around a couple of thousand fake Twitter users, and especially the topics concerning the Rotterdam election, you could see some trending topics that they changed, which was a lot of fun.
That's great. Yeah, and
Yes.
we have seen now indeed a current version of media critique and to quite a lot of communication networks. But if I think of V2, I also think of course of the V2 lab, and that is more like really oriented to assist in building technological artworks and even reflecting on robotics, which is I think you're actually one of the only media art institutes in the Netherlands that has this focus, also the use of robotics in society. In the book, that it starts already with Adelbrecht by Martin Spanjaard. There's a really cute, tiny thing that talks, but it's also going towards Marnix de Nijs and this anxiety for robotics in society.
It's also very much this love of having a real thing in the space doing something, the materiality of technology. So whereas I have been talking now quite a bit on when it's the internet, it's not so, or it doesn't feel so material. And also when it's VR, it doesn't feel material. And there's been a lot of research into kind of augmented reality and VR kind of stuff at V2 as well through the years. But a recurring thing has really been this materiality of the technology, having a 3D object in the space. Of course, it could be this 3D person, could be a person, could be Stellark with kind of wires and metal around himself. It could also be a good old-fashioned robot. It could be a swinging, a rotating loudspeaker, the work of, for instance, Edwin van der Heijden, and was it together with Marnix de Nijs? No, I don't remember. And or of course the kind of installations of Marnix de Nijs where you have to run motherfucker run, or where you that have this kind of tactility also to it. So also there is something that is a recurring thing at V2, and it is also, for instance, still now present in the Alex Adriaanssen's residency. So it's something that we continue to do. I know that in the chat now, Josephine Bosma was asking if we could have a kind of reflection on the deep history of V2 and how that influenced the whole history of V2 through the 1990s and the 2000s and 2010s. And I would love to do that. But I think that would take like way too long, because I think V2 has gone in that sense also through different phases, also in its approaches to technologies, and also in its way of in also the positioning of V2 within technological culture, or within a more commercialized technological culture. So whereas V2 has an origin more in the squads, there was definitely more of a it was definitely nearer to, for instance, commercial applications of the internet in, let's say, the end of the 90s, maybe, or around that time. Though still always with this kind of spirit of trying to find a different way of putting the emphasis somewhere else. But I think V2 in that sense has gone through different phases. Also in a sense that there have been phases in which V2 has focused really on specific technologies. Let's say, let's do wearable technology now and have the lab be specialized and have specialized people that do software and hardware for wearable technology or for augmented reality. Again, to now where there's no such a focus on specific technologies, and there is not sort of a promise of one specific or two specific technologies that we are totally focused on. So that's sort of in a very short answer to Josephine Bosma, who probably knows more about the history of V2 than me, because she's been there a lot.
I took the liberty of also I shared my screen, and
that was great.
Maybe so this is for me a really great example of, so this is of course the really early V2, in which artistic experimentation, but also the network function that you elaborated on, the supporting of the practice and the practice and theory
were the four there.
Yeah, were the four main goals, and that's roles, and as you can see now, we're still doing the same, and I liked your remark about bringing it back to the physical, to a specific object. What you can see on the left corner, it's a work explaining how you train an AI. It was in our latest in our test lab around artists working with AI, and it was really. It was a game console in which you both trained the AI and played it against each other afterwards. So it was really a bot creating like this system. And so even if we're working with algorithms and AI, you still have a lot of these examples of how we bring it back to the physical space. I think that's. And I won't kick over my laptop. We're still deep within the network system. We're still So that's I think is a good example of how we're still close to our first years.
Yeah, no, in that sense, it's always being close to actually making things, and also from let's say a material engagement with the technology that you're dealing with, though material in this sense might be writing code, but it could also be like making a robot, connecting the Arduino with a piece of code and connecting that again to big pieces of metal that will influence an installation somewhere. I mean, I'm just making something up here now, but this practical engagement with the technology was, I think, where V2 started, and is also where V2 is now, and is something that characterized the events and the projects that V2 did throughout the years. And maybe to come back to these ideas of structures of feeling, I think the structures of feeling of the people engaged with all of these things, they have changed. I think that though, and the kind of maybe dreams and promises connected to the technologies that you work with have changed as well. Let's say maybe what bridge shall we make? Oh, now there's people in
introduction to the household, which is
exactly. They are not. I think they are not aware of that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
One of the things you in preparation shared Roy Ascott quote. I don't know if it's still in your presentation.
I was wondering if we would now go over through to this chapter already. Let's just do that because I love talking about that. So
yeah,
and it's a great topic as well. So
yeah, and well, the reason I brought it up was specifically on the image you showed. Was really the understanding the development in the field of technology and science, and that's what's still quite close to my personal practice, I think, because it's close to this notion of the embedded position of an artist, that and that's for me also quite close to the manifesto. Because it's not creating work where you reflect in this safe position of your own house or of your own gallery or the white cube, but you bring yourself into the real world, learning the technical aspect of it, and thereby criticizing it in the field. And I introduce this because I have some examples of, for example, Jeroen van Loon or Cecilia Johnson, which we worked with during the summer sessions, and is one of the examples in the book, which could be the newer version of this approach, I think. But maybe you want to introduce Roy's project.
Yeah, maybe it was not completely clear to all of you what we were talking about. So one of the events at V2 that has always kind of fascinated me is actually I think the third in a series, and I'll put up the. Sorry, is share screen working? No, not yet. It will be now, I think. Yeah. So it's this event, the Day of Telenoia. Actually, it was 2 days with a lecture of Roy Ascott on the 30th of October and a 24-hour performance afterward. And Roy Ascott is theorist, artist, who has, from the early days in the 1970s, has deeply thought on how network technology would change the arts, would change culture, would change society. There's always a little bit of psychedelics in his in his theory. Goes too far to go into that now, but he was one of the early thinkers in this field, and has written a lot on network technology and culture and the arts, and how it would change our minds and how it would be changed by that. And of course, one of the things is then that the artist is not anymore this individual outside society that has this autonomous position and makes his own purely individual piece of art, but the artist is someone who is embedded in society, and that's sort of also what Florian was referring to. This is, I'd say, also something that kind of talking about different structures of feeling or different ways of how we think about art, something which is different also now. Ruben Jacobs, before he wrote the book Artenauten for V2, Artenauten is about how artists reflect on the Anthropocene and issues around ecology. His previous book, which is called Everyone is an Artist, it's been translated in English as well, reflects on this like really big difference between the romantic idea of the artist as an individual and, let's say, the contemporary issue of art, where maybe the main thing that an artist is involved with is not voicing or articulating a purely individual autonomous position against society, because I see things differently and you have to know about that. But that the big issue is, how can we articulate what we have in common? Where is our communality? And that would, of course, then also give an artist a much more embedded place within society and also within working with technology. And I'd say that's maybe also what you were kind of getting to in how people like Cecilia Jonsson has developed a project of making an iron ring at V2 and involving different people and different organizations in doing that. So do you want to say something to that, Florian?
Yeah, I was trying to illustrate it with the photos.
But I have to, I'll stop sharing here and you can take over.
Yeah, but maybe, it's a couple of years before I started working at V2, but it's a project, it's a project that we hear.
Yeah, this is the iron ring of Cecilia Jonsson.
Yeah. Do you want to explain tell something about it, or shall I?
Yeah, well, basically, you can go ahead.
Well, it's a lovely example because it's one of our really successful and beautiful summer session project, but it's a process in which within the 8 weeks that a summer session has, she found a way of to distill iron from plants that you see all the way on the left on the image, and
grass.
Grass, but for sure you need a lot of grass to get to.
And it was grass from really a polluted field pollution with iron and industrial pollution. And the question that she started with, could you kind of make an iron ring from iron that you harvest from this grass that is growing there, and that kind of also cleans the area there. And she figured out a way of doing that. I mean, the kind of iron that it gave was kind of brittle, but it did work. But the project is much more also about involving all of these different actors in this whole process and showing all, bringing that to the foreground as well, in kind of a really kind of radical proposal and for making getting iron connected to cleaning polluted areas.
Yeah, and the reason I brought it up is this is one of these examples of an artist just within these 8 weeks booked a plane ticket, flew to Spain to really start doing it, to learn by experimenting. And that's also the reason I brought up Jeroen van Loon, who it's the sellout.me, in which to reflect on the ability to analyze DNA. He just analyzed his DNA, and as the installation made it available for purchase, knowing that it not only affect him, but you could learn a lot about his future son or or the rest of his family, and he just went to the hospital to get his DNA analyzed. Parallel wrote a lot of people from different fields what it would mean to sell your DNA. People from tech security, people from universities, from Christie's, the auction house, what it means within the field of art, and we were able to have it as exhibition also in the last period, and host a conversation around what it meant on the night where the auction ended. So that's also one of these examples of like this really embedded position to take in.
Yeah, and that also ties in more into this like critical approach. Also, indeed, maybe as as an institute or as a place for media art, they're asking ethical questions. I think that's actually something we didn't touch upon. Which I don't see maybe in many of the media art institutes currently working in the Netherlands, but maybe that's something. Is that something V2 wants to address? Like open the space for criticality, for like pushing boundaries within technology and society in an ethical
absolutely
sense?
Yeah, very much.
Yeah, very much so. I would say it's maybe not always just as apparent in the events and the realized projects, but I'd say it's one of the overarching interests, and one of the reasons why V2 exists. I mean, it is, why are you doing all these things? It is nowadays it is very much about asking critical questions. Not maybe the easy ones, but maybe the more ambiguous ones, the more complex ones, the ones where the criticism is maybe not always so much in your face. It's not maybe always super activist, though like a work of Jonas Lund is super activist. But yes, this, I mean, a place like V2 exists exactly to ask these questions and keep on asking critical questions on why are we using these technologies? How are we using it? How are we changed by it? Is that good? Is that bad? How are we embedded in it? How could we make a nicer world working with all these technologies? And maybe the sort of going back to the punk roots of V2, maybe that sort of critical stance is kind of apparent in the punk image of early V2 and is much less apparent now. But I'd say the questions that are being asked now are more critical than the ones that were probably being asked in the 1980s. Though in the 1980s, it came much more from a clear position of, I'm missing the English word now, verzet, opposition, let's say. So yes, and this, so we go and sort of the last old project that I wanted to show is kind of this Telenoia project of Robert Adrian as well, with first a lecture of Roy Ascott, and the next day this 24-hour performance by Robert Adrian. And I know that Josephine Bosma was there, who's watching this now, and I know she's written about it as well in her book as one of the decisive moments maybe in how she thinks about art and technology. I wasn't there. 1990 or 92, let's see now. I'll share the screen and we'll see.
Yeah, one thing before we dive into this project was that of course we're currently our critical approach is a lot in the biases in AIs or like these current topics. But I was really surprised to see we just had a jury meeting with all of the summer session applicants, so the young artists under 35 that we normally send out for an international residency, and they really with lots of these projects I found refound the punk feeling that V2 started with. So it might be due to this current situation that we'll see a lot more of those in the near future.
Yeah. Well, this is also partly, I mean, this is going back to the start of our presentation now, sort of this bigger interest in this 1980s history, which is for me not something of going back to, oh, this is like how great V2 was in the past, blah, blah. It's not that. It's something of this punk attitude that might be sort of feel relevant to a younger generation of artists, and that's also something that I find interesting. And we wanted to sort of close off with a video of this Telenoia project that I was reminded also of because of Martijn van Boven's presentation a couple of 2 weeks ago, I think, Communication Hiccups for Lima as well, where he showed videos that were partly chosen by his students. And the first video there was from Tom Klinkovstein, I want to say Klinkovitz, but which was this in a sense, really boring slow scan performance, looking at an image being sent from the other side of the world that appears very, very slowly on the screen. And basically the video is just people waiting for something to happen. So there's this great video as well in the archive of V2, or is it a great video? I don't know. It's kind of, I thought it was 9 minutes long, but Jose Vizcaya, when I sent it to him, like mentioned, like, the video is looped, didn't you see? So, but I was kind of looking at just persons looking at the phone, changing a wire, talking to each other. So it's an 8 or 4 minute segment of 24 hours of an online meeting where also people from the outside, if you had a telephone number, could participate. And what I find fascinating about this video is, on the one hand, that you can see how boring it is. It's just people waiting for something to happen, and then what happens is it that interesting? Well, maybe it is, but there's also this sense of anticipation and of something that is going to happen, and something great that is actually going to change the world, and that is going to change our interaction with each other. I mean, something that until then could be done on television with the Olympic Games, you could do in your own home, make a video connection with the other side of the world and be in cyberspace like that. Both this is predating the word cyberspace, I think. So this is before the World Wide Web, before a lot of people have internet access. This is from the world of BBSs and the world of first artists already for a couple of years were connecting their computers to telephones, using sometimes the networks of big corporations where they had managed to kind of, for some work that they did, get access to it and could use it to do little artistic experimentations. So, and I'm gonna try to share the screen once for a last time, because where is it?
In the meantime, Tom Klinkerstein is in the chat explaining
wow, great.
what he was doing at the time.
That's really great.
That's super fun.
Because this is, is it? is it there already? So this is just the backside of the flyer, and yeah, it's in Dutch because at that time V2 was Dutch. So it's 24 hours, a telecommunication project through telephone lines, and it was a concert as well with a synthesizer that was at V2, but it was being played partly, I think, from Austria, from and you could phone in yourself, I think, on the other numbers that will be used for modem or fax, and then they mentioned the 4 numbers that they had gotten, so they gotten the telephone lines to do this. So kind of everything that we're doing now, like waiting online for someone else to begin to talk. They were kind of trying it out, and there was this great sense of anticipation of an unoccupied world that could be occupied by great art as well, and where we could start and could communicate in different ways, in new ways with each other, and build a new world. And this feeling I find very very interesting and very somehow it still comes across. And I'd say some people who are watching now will maybe even see themselves in the video and be remembered of how it was then. So let's just have a quick look at I think 4 minutes from it. It's again low quality because I hadn't access to the higher quality that is there at the archive of V2, but this one is just the quality that's online available. So shall we watch it and then come back once more? And yeah, Jose, yes. So you can start.
Yeah. Yeah, quite some people actually. La pittura con la pedina?
It's Pascal Schmid, isn't it? Yeah, it is. Its voice is like...
And around 64,000
Oh yeah, I do, but all French. All the French speak the same.
So we try to do with a pigment on that.
Yeah.
You know,
Don't tell her.
Do you work out of that stage? Is that your creative stage, or
It's Pascal's speech. Is it? Yes, Pascal. Its voice is like.
And around 64,000 columns possible.
I do, but all French. All the French speak the same.
So we try to make a picture to win the cinematograph.
Okay, yes, great.
We try to win the picture and leave it together.
I can't be there,
And have a picture with all pictures coming from the wall. And doing a last
Yes.
okay?
Your image is
Yeah, that was fun to watch. And indeed, like what were we actually watching? Maybe we look at our Zoom meetings in 30 years the same way we look with this curiosity to this kind of material.
Yeah, who knows? Though with our Zoom meetings, you cannot see what computers we are using, what cables. You don't see the hooking up of the different bits of technology, and yeah, that's one of the interesting things to watch a documentation like this. We were discussing as well, just while the video was running, like that, for instance, 2 years after this performance, you would probably be completely bored in watching this video. But kind of so many years later, there's so much in this to look at. The different phones, the different cables, what people are doing, how they behave, the kind of the anticipation of this telepresence that you can almost see still in the image. So that's yeah, that's one snippet past of V2, and yeah, maybe one snippet of also a structure of feeling of these early 1990s, when the first people were kind of discovering network technology as a portal to a new world. What many of us discovered around 94, and then the rest of the world came after us after like 98. When was it? And now it's everywhere, and maybe not has not manifested in a way that they or we had hoped for in the early 90s. But yeah, there's a lot of philosophy about that.
Maybe you can create new portals that we don't know
Well,
the existence of yet.
Exactly. I think that's one of the things that we should be trying to do now is again create new ways of communicating, and in great ways, in ways that are that make our lives nicer.
Yeah, that's I think
or
that's
that make it or actually that make it possible to do something that is worthwhile. I'd say many of us, I mean, now we're a bit discussing on this whole Zoom thing, Jitsi, Skype, whatever, that we're all using now so much. Try to make music with 4 people at the same time. It still isn't working. So, and I know that people like Don Foresta, who I interviewed for Sonic X a couple of years ago, they were thinking about creating, just like Robert Adrian or Tom Klinkerstein, were thinking of creating such spaces where you could do these things, where you could really do art in a virtual space and have also all this micro timing that we don't have. Though it could be interesting to work with the delay that we need to work with. Pauline Oliveros, who has said also, like, we are delay, and that's why she was working with delay in her compositions and was very interested in using virtual environments for music, for instance. But I'd say, like, yeah, I mean, the sort of situation that we've gotten ourselves into is kind of also a new incentive of creating that anew, maybe. Anyway, now we're
no, but
not
that's
reflecting
also
on the
what I
history
meant,
of V2 or the history of media art, but reflecting
but
on kind
also,
of future. But
yeah. No, because then the real punky spirit would not like choose either between Jitsi or Zoom, but
no,
develop something that like goes completely like.
That will be different. And I mean,
Maybe a
I'd say
paradigm shift.
those sort of practices do exist as well, and existed already before us, but before Corona. I mean, it could be interesting to more dive into those things.
Josephine mentioned the 3x3. I think she refers to the next one we'll do with Dante Bone.
Yeah,
and he will in 3 experiments play with that a little. The first one will be him in the space and the online audience working with light, then somewhat semi-public if all goes well, and then bringing a pianist into the equation of the 3rd edition. So yeah.
When is that going to be, Florian?
It's always the first Friday of the month. So it's the first, the 5th of June will be the first one, happening online. But I didn't anticipate of making it a really PR moment out of it.
No, yeah,
3rd of July, and then the 1st of August. But it's the 3 events are already online on the website of V2, www.v2.nl. But yeah, Dante Bone is a composer and musician, and he's prepared to do 3 experiments, which I think will be interesting, nice, beautiful. So looking forward to that.
Just a look into the very nearby future. That's maybe where we're gonna end it. So next month, and our nearby future is tomorrow night, when will be the last event of this series. I will talk to Arjan Dinnewind from Impact, who has made a documentary on the history of the festival. So looking forward to that. So yeah, for now, I want to thank you all so much. Thank you, Florian. Thank you, Ari, for giving such a rich insight into the history, present and future of the institute, not institute, of the
lab for the unstable.
The lab. So sorry about that. And thanks for the audience for engaging by chat with us, and hope to see you all again soon here online. Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Yeah.